You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
If we had to pick the strongest and weakest units on the team, and there's only 3 units, you got your offense, your defense, and your special teams. I think we can all agree the strength is clearly the offense. And the weakness, the unit that has been the most concerning through 3 games, is the defense. And it reared its ugly head against Stanford, particularly in the beginning and the very end of this game. Before we get into the negatives, I do want to start with the positives. I said going into the week that one thing I want to see this defense do more of, because they hadn't really done it through 2 games, is create turnovers. And they had 2 interceptions. Devin Grant made a great play in the second quarter when Syracuse was down 10-0. They looked like they were in trouble, but Devin Grant made a great break on the ball, got an interception, set Syracuse up in the red zone. Now, the Orange didn't capitalize on it. They got a field goal, but still, it was a great play by Devin Grant to pick it off. And then the second pick, Clarence Lewis just took advantage of a gift by Ashton Daniels. He threw the ball up in the third quarter, I believe, in triple coverage. It might have been the second quarter. I don't remember, but he threw the ball up in triple coverage, and Clarence Lewis came down with the interception. It was a deep ball. It was basically an arm punt, but it's not an arm punt if it's first or second down. Only on third down you could say arm punt. It was a really bad decision by Daniels, but you got to give Syracuse credit for taking advantage of when the ball was thrown right at them for an interception. And they could have had more. Clarence Lewis in the fourth quarter barely missed on another interception. It was off Kyle McCord's interception that he had that set Stanford up to take a 23-17 lead on the Orange. So they created turnovers, and they had chances for even more of them. I have to give them credit for that. But now we get into the negative. And the Syracuse defense, for the 3rd straight game, gave up over 350 total yards of offense. That's not very good. And let's start with the run defense, because I was feeling good about this run defense after their game against Georgia Tech. They struggled mightily against Ohio, giving up over 250 yards on the ground to Ohio. Not Ohio State, Ohio. But then they bounced back. They were terrific against Georgia Tech. Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, that is as good of a backfield duo as you're going to get. And I say backfield duo because I'm counting Haynes King as an incredible runner as a quarterback. He can obviously sling it, but he's great at running the football. He's got a little Josh Allen in him. He's not the same as Josh Allen, for the record, but he's got a little bit of that Josh Allen quality in him where he can run the ball. And aside from a couple breakdowns, Syracuse did an excellent job shutting down the Georgia Tech running game. Which is why this game made not a lot of sense. It didn't make a lot of sense. I get that Dion Wilson, the New Mexico State transfer, was out. Dion Wilson was Syracuse's highest graded run defender according to PFF prior to the game, but he didn't play. So maybe Dion Wilson made that much of an impact for this team. And hopefully his injury is nothing serious. But against Stanford on Friday night, this run defense, I mean, Chris Davis Jr., 8 carries, 79 yards. That is 8.8 yards per carry. Micah Ford, 8 carries, or 47 yards, 5.9 yards per carry. That's not good. Those are not good numbers at all. This is not exactly the Pony Express here, okay? They don't have Eric Dickerson and Craig James running the football, all right? With all due respect to Chris Davis Jr. and Micah Ford, that ain't the Pony Express of SMU in the early 80s. It's not, all right? And I get that Dion Wilson was out, but this run defense just was not good enough. And they had trouble stopping the zone read as well, because there were a lot of holes, and it didn't seem like Syracuse knew what they were doing on the zone read with Ashton Daniels. Guys, they just played Haynes King and Jamal Haynes and Georgia Tech. They run a lot of zone read. It's just mind-boggling that they couldn't carry over that performance that they had against Georgia Tech into this game against Stanford. It's part of the reason why I think this defense right now is the weak link of the team. Let's go to the pass defense. It was bad early. Stanford missed some chances because Ashton Daniels, look, he saved the best for last. That was a great throw to Elic Ayomanor on the end of the game on that fourth down. A perfect throw. But prior to that throw, Daniels did not impress me with his accuracy. So even though Syracuse did a relatively good job, you would think, on paper, giving up less than 200 yards through the air in the game, I think that Stanford left a little meat on the bone. Because I don't think Daniels is that accurate. He missed Elic Ayomanor in the first quarter for what would have been a 50, 60-yard touchdown over the middle of the field, but he missed him. He overthrew him. And then, even on the touchdown grab by Ayomanor, that one-handed, it was a sick catch. It was a bad throw, but Ayomanor made a great play on it. But it would have bailed out Syracuse in that regard. Stanford would have had to settle for a field goal instead of a touchdown. Ultimately, led Stanford to a win. This pass defense, when they go up against a true number one like Elic Ayomanor, obviously he's like an NFL wide receiver, so maybe it's not fair to criticize these DBs. And they were without Marcellus Barnes for most of the game too. Marcellus Barnes, here's the update from Fran Brown, back spasms. He had back spasms. He did not return. Hopefully it's nothing major. He can get back to practice and play against Holy Cross. Regardless, what are they going to do when they have to play against another number one wide receiver like an Elic Ayomanor? I know that NC State has KC Concepcion, so they're going to play. Miami's got a ton of weapons. What is going to happen to this? Again, they did a great job against Georgia Tech until the very end of that game. I don't know. This defense could be very hot and cold. I guess that is the best way to put it. The nice way to put it. They're hot and they're cold at the same time. It just overall, it was not a great game for them. They didn't really come ready to play. They stiffened in the middle of the game. But at the end of the game, obviously, when they needed to stop, they couldn't get it done. They just couldn't get it done.